So I'm not too much of a seasonal reader anymore because I really feel like I'm just constantly struggling under the weight of a never-ending TBR. But I have very fond memories of my childhood, and even up until probably like less than 10 years ago, of spending my summers or every spare minute that I had of my summers out in the garden reading. So today I have 5 books that I would like to recommend to you guys that I think would be the perfect summer read. So summer reads to me are contemporary a lot of the time. We have a lot of romance in there. They're also quite quick to get through. They're books that you could read in a sitting. Sometimes you'd have to be dedicated to do it, like you'd have to spend all day in the garden to be able to do it, but they are books that I guess entice you to read them all in one sitting, and hand in hand with that they're also like super immersive. So today I have 2 contemporary romances. I have 1 contemporary manga, 1 small sci-fi, and 1 standalone fantasy that I think would be perfect reads for the summer months. So I am going to kick off with that standalone fantasy because I don't actually own it. I borrowed a copy off Ashley when I read it a couple of years ago, and I've just never actually picked up my own copy, but that is Gods of Jade and Shadow by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. This one has a fairy tale-esque nature to it because it draws on Mexican mythology, and we're following a girl. It's set in the 20s. We're following a young woman called Cassiopeia who has had to move in with her grandfather, and her grandfather looks down upon her mother and her, so she is to spend her summers just dreaming of the jazz age as she is cleaning this, I think it's a mansion that like her grandfather lives in. So one day she opens a chest at the foot of her grandfather's bed that she's been forbidden to open, and she accidentally summons the Mayan god of death, which sends her on this grand adventure that takes her all the way through Mexico, through the jungle, and also into the realm of the god of the dead. So there are a couple of reasons why I think this is super suitable for summer. One is obviously the setting of this because it is set in South America, which obviously has quite a warm climate. It also gives the impression to me of a summer adventure, and it's not that it's formatted like that. It's not that it's formatted as a summer adventure for the character, but just the way that it's this kind of like once in a lifetime experience that she kind of goes along with, that has, because it's a standalone, it has like a very clear-cut beginning and end with no threads that leave off. It does give that impression of like a summer adventure, you know, something that's like a little bit outside of the norm of everyday life that you would embrace in like your summer holidays, where you're not like tied down to your typical routine. I really like this as well because while it's not a romance, it does have a slight romantic nature to it. And if you guys, I've recommended this book in a if you've liked this book then you'll like this book video before, for fans of the Winter Night trilogy by Catherine Arden, because I do feel like it is a very similar story but with a different culture as the backdrop instead of Russian. So summer to me absolutely screams contemporary romances, so I could have just done a contemporary romance recommendations video instead of this. I decided to pick the 2 contemporary romances I've read that most scream summer to me, and without a doubt the one, if I had to recommend one book that embodies summer to me, I feel like I would go with Get Alive Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert, or this entire trilogy. So this is a series of contemporary romances that follow the Brown sisters. Chloe in particular is chronically ill, and she lives quite carefully because of this, but one day after a near-death experience she decides to kind of like actually go out and live her life a little bit more, and she moves out of her parents' home into this apartment building where she meets is it the superintendent or like the handyman called Red. Now the reason why these ones are so summery to me is just because they are so funny. Once again, I think I recommended this in the if you like this you'll like this video, because the humor in this to me is very much like the humor in the Georgia Nicholson series by Louise Renison, which is my favorite series from my childhood. So it feels like a series that if you loved the Georgia Nicholson series when you were younger, then you would very much love the Brown Sisters series, because it feels like, I guess, an adult version of that. This was kind of one of the first contemporary romances that I read as well. It's very funny, uplifting, kind of light, although with Chloe being chronically ill, like it does follow some of her darker days. It's a very unproblematic romance in my opinion, so everything about it to me just screams like light, fun summer, and it really is like the humor in there that really makes it feel super summery to me. I feel like this is a book that you could take on the beach and just have like a really good time with, just like laying on the beach all day reading it. The other contemporary romance is a queer one, which is One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. This one is sapphic. I do enjoy Casey McQuiston's books. I haven't read Shara Wheeler yet, but I've read One Last Stop and also Red, White and Royal Blue, which would also be a great summer summer read, and I've given both of them 4 stars. I do feel like there's something about Casey McQuiston's books that when I pick them up, I always expect them to be first person and they're actually third, and it throws me a little bit. And they're very kind of like idealistic, a little bit unrealistic, which I feel fits into this like summer haze feeling that a lot of us have going on, especially like when we are on holiday during the summer. So this one is set in New York City, and it's following a young woman called August who moves to New York, and she meets the perfect woman on the train. This train is like part of her normal commute, so she gets used to and like looks forward to talking to this woman on the train every day, who has this like kind of 70s 80s rocker look. And it's only when August kind of invites Jane out on a date she realizes that there's something very wrong. Like, Jane just doesn't get on this train as a commute, she's actually stuck on this train and has been since whichever year she got on. It is like the 70s or the 80s. This one definitely isn't the fastest paced romance that you're gonna pick up. Casey McQuiston does also have very, very long chapters, which I feel is very unusual for the genre, but I feel like it's truly just the atmosphere of this, the way that Casey McQuiston writes things that are essentially, they feel a lot of the time, especially with Red, White and Royal Blue, that they take place in an ideal world where some of the like harsh truths that we don't want to face about the world just like pretty much don't exist. That to me is why these books lend themselves really well to being read in summer. While we're on the contemporary train, we will go with the manga, which is Dreaming Sun by Ichigo Takano. Now, Ichigo Takano also has another manga series that I really like, but it is a lot heavier than this, and that one is called Orange, and it deals with mental health a lot. I have recommended it before on my channel, whereas this one is like a young adult version of New Girl. The sections, the volumes are super short, they're super fun, and they're following they're a little bit unrealistic in like the setup for this series, because we're following a young girl whose father has remarried, they've got a new baby, she's feeling out of place in her home. She's a teenager, so I would say she's somewhere between like 15 and maybe 17, and she decides that she's leaving home, she's running away from home. So she packs up her stuff and she leaves, and she finds this drunk guy passed out in the park, and he offers her a place to live, says that she can come live with him providing that she tells him why she ran away. She finds his missing house key, and she has a dream and falls in love. So she ends up moving into this house with 2 other teenage boys and the drunk guy from the park, who turns out to be like their landlord. Sounds super problematic and obviously very sketchy, but it's not in that like regard. Like, this girl clearly has never heard of stranger danger, and luckily for her it worked out this time. But this is not like how I would recommend starting your like brand new life and your grand adventure. But it has a little bit of a romantic plot line in here because she has a crush on one of the guys who lives there. It's very humorous and it's super heartwarming. I'm not a person who reads a lot of just like typical classic contemporary stories unless they're romance, and I don't read the most contemporary romance either, but there's something about contemporary manga that I really like. I think it's because when it comes to fantasy, I like really detailed, deep world building, whereas in manga, when it's fantastical, I don't feel like the world building really reaches the depth. Like, I always have more questions about the world than a manga typically provides in fantasy form. But on the flip side of that, when I read contemporary books, I feel like they go on for too long. So contemporary manga for me is perfect because it delivers like those fun, heartwarming vibes, especially Dreaming Sun, that you get from a contemporary story, but in like a much smaller, more concise package. And then the final one that I have is one that reads a little bit like a fever dream, can't lie, and that is This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El Motar and Max Gladstone. So this one is a very short book. It's only 198 pages, and you just have to roll with it. So the plot of this one is that we are following 2 agents that work for time travel agencies, and both of them are trying to manipulate the events of time in a way that best benefits the agency they work for. Think about the agency in Umbrella Academy, if you've seen that. That's the kind of, I feel, agency that these 2 characters work for. So our main characters are from each of the respective agencies, and one of them leaves a message for the other one at some point in time, leads to them corresponding across millennia, essentially. Some of this book is set in the future, some is set in the past, and it is more about the 2 agents than it is about the time travel stuff. So I didn't understand a lot of this book, especially within those time travel elements and how kind of abstract it is and how little time we spend in each section, because it's not about that. It's about the beauty of their relationship. Now, this one is going to make you think a little bit. It's going to make your head hurt a little bit, but if you can let go of trying to fully understand the sci-fi, it becomes a really quick immersive read about friendship and love, as opposed to like a head-bendy time travel book. Now, it is really hard for me to let go of trying to understand things, but I feel like in this instance it really worked, and it ended up being kind of like a really beautiful love story on this really interesting backdrop that spans millennia and takes place like all across the universe. This one I did also read. I read it for one of the 48-hour bookoplathons, so I read it in like 4 hours, had a great time, gave it 5 stars. So there we have 5 fun, immersive, light, heartwarming summer reads. Down in the comments, please let me know what's your #1 ideal summer recommendation. If you could recommend any book that you've ever read for somebody else to read in summer, what would that be? For me, I definitely lean towards contemporary romance in the summer if I do get a chance to read seasonally. And I also really do like a thriller. I like reading thrillers more in the summer than I do in the fall. The problem is that all of the thrillers that I really like are a little bit more meaty and dense than what I'd consider a summer thriller. None of these summer thrillers I've actually read I enjoyed enough to like put in a recommendation video, but just so you know, that is a genre that I also like really associate with summer. Aside from leaving me a comment to let me know you were here, please don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna. If you head into my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish Kindle website, the Etsy for that, and a 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.